Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Many of you know me, and for those who don't, my name's Julianne. I'm the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner with Trade and Investment Queensland in China. I'm delighted to be your moderator today on this webinar that's brought to you by Study Queensland. As we all know, COVID-19 has disrupted the world as we know it, and it continues to shape and reshape us all at the economic, community and individual levels. Along with tourism, education training sector was and continues to be at the centre of COVID-19's impact zone. Schools, language and pathways, vocational education training, higher ed, research, study tours, you name it, all facets of our sectors in Queensland have felt the full brunt of this pandemic. And we are all in it together. Disruption can also create and super speed transformation. So our webinar today is going to look at this through the lenses and the commentary of our guest presenters. We're going to look to unpack some of the silver linings of the storm clouds above us, as well as taking stock of the how damage and discuss which impressions may remain with us for some unforeseeable time. So today I'm delighted to introduce and acknowledge and thank our presenters today. We have joining us Ms. Brooke Houdigan, Minister Councillor, Education and Research from the Australian Embassy in China. We have Mr. Rhett Miller, Austrade's Education Commissioner for North Asia. And we're also joined by Ms. Makia Ma, representing the Study Queensland team in China, with Trade and Investment Queensland, and Makia is based in Beijing. So we have a lot to cover today, and our webinar may run over the hour, but hopefully our lively discussions towards the end of the seminar will keep you logged in, even if we are a wee bit over time. So you can post your questions during the webinar, and we will endeavour to address them either privately or at the end interactive discussion session of the webinar. And also please feel free to reach out to our Study Queensland team in China as well as across Queensland. So links to the copies of the presentations given today will also be available and shared after the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Brooke Houdigan. Brooke is well known to many Queenslanders joining us online today. She's worked in a number of Australian government departments, predominantly focusing on social policy and criminal justice. And prior to joining the Department of Education, Brooke led the branch in the Department of Social Services, responsible for establishing the National Redress Scheme for survivors of institutional child sexual abuse. She's also led efforts on children's policy and criminal law reform, and she's previously worked and lived in the UK and studied in Beijing. So please join me all in welcoming Brooke. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, JA. Can you hear me? Thank you for that introduction, and thank you everybody for your time today. It's really exciting to be part of this forum. I'm hoping with the time I've got available to touch on 4 main topics, and JA just cut me off when I've expended my time. But I want today to have a quick chat about the sort of COVID situation in Australia. I want to talk a little bit about the policy and regulatory space and what the government's doing to support providers and students during this difficult time. I want to talk specifically about the recognition of online qualifications, because I know that will probably be top of mind for a number of people. And then I want to quickly touch on, if I've got time, what cooperation in the education space with China looks like into the future. So I might kick off with just a quick overview of the state of play in Australia. While many countries in the world are sadly still fighting great pressure from the COVID pandemic, as JA has mentioned, Australia is doing pretty well. In fact, very well. We have had a number of lives lost, but things are looking really positive in terms of the prevention of the spread of COVID. You might have seen that on the 8th of May, the Prime Minister announced a 3-step roadmap for returning to a COVID-safe Australia. We are in step 1 at the moment, but interestingly, you might have noticed that under step 3 of the plan, the government said that it will consider the return of international students to Australia from offshore. So it is a gradual process, and I must flag that states and territories will move at different times through each stage of the roadmap. And the National Cabinet has made it very clear that our progression through the stages will depend largely on the significant and sustained suppression of COVID case numbers and our ability to rapidly contain any outbreaks or community transmission of the virus. But this is heartening news, that stage 3, we can consider this. You will also know, no doubt, that we have launched a contract tracing mobile app, the COVID Safe app. And, there's been large uptake, but certainly the government wants to see more. Activity in all spaces, but in the education space as well, is still very much aligned with the advice of the Australian Health Protection Principal Committee that comprises the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Health Officers of all states and territories. Now, under that advice, education has always been seen as an essential service, and as such, its continuity throughout this pandemic has been prioritised and supported. AHPPC has been very much in favour of schools staying open, universities too, but practicing the appropriate risk mitigation strategies and social distancing. And there is a range of advice available on the australia.gov.au website and the health website on the AHPPC's advice on that front as well. But in this context, obviously, many education providers have had to move their mode of delivery to online. And this is both for domestic and for international students, including those currently offshore, who were not able or remain not able to travel to Australia to resume their studies. Now, I think last time I saw it was around 70% of Australia's higher education institutions have moved their delivery to online. So that's a significant amount. But I think it's also really worth noting that we do have experience in this space. A lot of Australian providers are very familiar with providing online delivery. What's changed is the scale. So I think it goes without saying that the measures that have been put in place to prevent COVID certainly have had a significant impact on the education sector, and that's to our providers and to our students. A number of our international students enrolled in semester 1 remain not able to travel to Australia because of the travel restrictions. But I think important to note too, and I believe we put out some data recently on our website, the DC website, that we haven't seen a number of deferrals. I mean, there has been an increase, but it's not a market increase in deferrals or cancellations. So that's a positive sign. And the assumption is that I think the majority of students who are offshore, our international student cohort offshore, are conducting their studies online. I expect everyone is very keen to know what it looks like for semester 2. I note that universities in particular, some of them have start dates that are probably late June, early July, so that's quite soon. As the Prime Minister made clear in the 3-step process, university life is unlikely to return to full face-to-face until we reach step 3 and beyond. And it is a gradual process, and unfortunately I don't have a crystal ball to sort of indicate exactly when that might be. It all depends on just how the pandemic develops and how our ability to prevent its transmission develops as well. So, I think it's safe to assume that online delivery will continue for a time, and it's important that we have, measures in place to support that. So I want to have a quick chat about the policy and regulatory space in respect of online learning in particular. At the start of the pandemic, we realised, given China, we had a travel restriction with China very early on in February. We worked closely with Austrade, and Rep might talk about this later, to develop a guide for delivery of online education into China. So this is still available on the Study Australia website. It's worth having a look if you haven't seen it before. It provides high-level advice on the kind of technical aspects of online delivery into China, some of the challenges, and some sort of methodology for overcoming some of those challenges. It also lists a number of online providers that may be able to assist with the delivery of online education into China that might be of use. Importantly, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, TEQSA, also took a very quick response to the COVID pandemic. They are taking a pragmatic regulatory approach during this time. So they've reduced the administrative burden on providers. They realise and have loosened and become more flexible around the delivery of online education. I think they actually issued a statement to the effect that TEXA understands providers may not be in a position to offer courses via face-to-face delivery as long as students remain enrolled with their provider and the assessment requirements of the course allow it. TEXA will be flexible on the location of the students, the mode of delivery, and accept that minimum face-to-face teaching requirements may not be met at this time. They also extended the period for provider registration and course accreditation. They have minimised and deferred requests for information, and they're very focused on supporting students at this time. Because they recognise the mass transition to online delivery, they've produced an online learning a good practice guide, which is available on their website, the TEXA website, which is also worth checking out. It's an evolving document, so it's updated as new material becomes available. But of note, in that package, there is information for providers that are transitioning to online delivery, but also for students. And I think the student experience part of this is really important. Some students will be experiencing online education for their first time, and there will be challenges in that, in adapting to how to engage with lecturers and tutors and each other, and how to get advice in a different way. And I'm sure with time, all of those challenges have become surmountable and much easier to sort of deal with. But TEXA does have useful resources on its website to help students and providers in that transition phase. So that's worth checking out as well. There is a suite of support that's available to international students at this time. Again, the Study Australia website and Austrade have put out a very useful infographic, which I'm sure we can make available, JA, after this presentation. That is a useful one-stop shop for students and providers to go to and click on links to find out what support exists for students at all levels across all sectors at this time. So that includes, first and foremost, provider support, support from states and territories, and support at the federal level. So I'll make sure that we've got the link available to that after this session. Now I want to touch on quickly the recognition of online qualifications. This is a big issue for China in particular, because we know that they don't acknowledge online qualifications, wholly online qualifications. So from the outset of the pandemic, our office in Beijing with Austrade has been keeping close contact with the China Service Centre for Scholarly Exchange, the CSCSE, who is responsible for recognition of foreign qualifications. We have sought specific advice on behalf of providers and students. We also have sought some very general advice on their attitude towards online education at this time. And important to note, it has changed. They are flexible in their approach during the pandemic situation. So on the 3rd of April, the CSCSE has issued some formal advice about their position on their website. DC, my department, has also done an unofficial translation of that on our website. We can make those materials available to persons on this webinar after this. But essentially, the crux of their position is they acknowledge and support the flexible measures that institutions have adopted, such as extending registration dates and offering online courses. They confirm that online courses taken due to the inability to attend campus will not influence the verification of foreign qualifications. Now, one area that people will be interested in, the flexibility seems intended for students who were affected by the pandemic in semester 1. So we have gone back to the CSCSE to seek clarification about their position in respect of students commencing in semester 2. They have written back saying, yes, the intention of the position was for semester 1, but they are willing to see the state of play for semester 2 to see if they will continue that flexibility. So they're very interested to see the impact of COVID on students. If COVID is still a problem and is still preventing students from conducting their studies in the usual way, they will look to continue their flexible approach. So we will update our advice as that becomes available on our website as well. Finally, I just really quickly wanted to touch on what our cooperation looks like with China into the future. Austrade will likely discuss the picture in respect of our international student cohort. So I wanted to talk a little bit just about transnational education engagement with China, of which we have a great deal, and we have been building on that over 40 plus years. So it's a very important part of our bilateral relationship, and is certainly one thing that we want to continue to strengthen as well. You may have been aware from previous presentations that we've been trying to get a new memorandum of understanding with China on strategic education cooperation, and that still maintains our position, but we have had that on pause while the pandemic has been playing out. Obviously, governments across the world have had priorities in terms of their own domestic sector, so we have not been pushing that during the COVID pandemic. That said, we have still, wanted to have lines of communication open on our bilateral education cooperation, and we are still committed to strengthening that in key priorities. And they won't be any surprises to you, I think, but it's definitely activity in transnational education engagement and looking to strengthen that across all sectors, particularly in the vet space, which was certainly what it was pre-pandemic, but also currently. Vet research to better understand what the changes that are occurring in both our vet systems. We've got changes here occurring, and as JA mentioned, the 1+X and micro-credential shift, massive reform program in the vet space in China as well. We want to understand that more and what challenges and opportunities that might present for TNE in the vet space into the future. Micro-credentials is definitely an area we want to increase our cooperation in. China has made great advancements in 1+X. I think we can learn a lot from that. But also, there's now an even more urgent push for reskilling and upskilling in Australia, in China, and elsewhere. So I think that's an area where we can collaborate on more. Online education, that's an obvious one. China has done an enormous shift to moving all sectors of their education system online. So we want to leverage all those efforts and sort of strike while the iron is hot. They've got much experience now that they can share with us, and that's certainly an area we want to expand our collaboration in. And the school sector. We want to get more information out there about Australia's offerings, particularly as China resumes its very ambitious modernisation agenda. So I've probably gone over time. I'll leave it there, JA. Look forward to the questions from the audience, and thank you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of invaluable information there that you've shared. Gives us a lot to think about, and Q&A box has already started filling up, and we will get to those questions after we hear from Rhett. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rhett, the Education Commissioner North Asia with Austrade. You will see Rhett shortly on video, and we are going to facilitate a presentation. So the audience should be seeing a PowerPoint on your screens, and Rhett will walk us through that. So thanks so much, and over to you, Rhett.
Well, thank you very much, JA, and it's a pleasure to be joining everyone today here from Shanghai, where I have recently returned to post, which is a sign of how things are improving in the China market, with a number of Australian government officers returning here. So today, what I am going to do is talk to you a little bit about where we're at in market terms, and also provide some feedback on market attitudes as reported by agents in China. I'm also going to cover off on what we need to do and keep doing in the short to medium term in our collective response as a market, and then go over what our longer term recovery plan might look like in terms of initiatives that Austrade has planned, some of which we're working on together with DESI. And finally, I'll finish off with some info on useful resources for you all to access to help you dealing with COVID-19 and its impact, both now and into the future. So if we could roll on to the first slide, please. Okay, so just moving on to that slide. Great. Okay. So look, in terms of where we're at with regard to the market, I think as you're all broadly aware, 39% of all Chinese student visa holders remain outside Australia. China is arguably the most impacted key market when it comes to students being stuck offshore. And that's, of course, driven by the fact that Australia's border closure with China happened very early on February 1st. Some students did, of course, come through third-party countries into Australia, which meant that we were able to boost the number of Chinese students who have been able to undertake a study here. However, a large proportion, as you can see there, remain offshore. As Brooke mentioned, online adoption in Australia has been very impressive, and as she noted, 70% of higher education courses are now online. Something else that should be pointed to is the speed at which our online adoption happened, particularly as it related just to Chinese students in those initial days when the impact was squarely on China. So to the beginning of March, we had a number of key group of 8 providers, for example, that had listed a large number of courses online. The ANU had some 700 courses online by the beginning of March, University of Sydney, 1,000 courses, I think reflecting of the strong commitment that various institutions had to servicing Chinese students online at the beginning of the crisis. In saying that, the market attitude to longer term online study, that's looking at semester 2 and beyond, remains mixed. As Brooke mentioned, there has been strong commitment for semester 1. However, if you look at a survey that IDP has recently conducted of nearly 7,000 applicants intending to study at a range of major destinations, there was mixed results when it came to attitude with regard to online study. So of all the applicants surveyed, 38% indicated that they would defer entry to study face-to-face rather than study online. 31% indicated that they would study online but wish to transition to face-to-face as soon as possible. Only 10% of those surveyed indicated they were committed to studying online indefinitely, and the remaining students surveyed indicated that they were either undecided or would withdraw. However, coming out of that, there has been some very good news, I think, for Australia, insofar as applicants for Australian providers had a higher tolerance for starting studies online as long as face-to-face becomes available. That was less so for postgraduate applicants for Australia, but nonetheless, of all the market destinations for students surveyed, Australia had that highest tolerance for studying online, which is good. Also of interest to you all, I think, is applicants for New Zealand providers had the highest percentage of applicants who indicated they were likely to change their destination if other countries open borders and enable face-to-face learning first, which may bode well for Australia as a potential alternative option, depending on when we grant entry to international students during that stage 3 process that Brooke mentioned. In terms of agent feedback in the market, we have heard that inquiry numbers have dropped significantly, and inquiries have dropped up to 50% depending on the subsector, in particular in the school sector, and I know that there's a number of schools listening. There was that drop up to 50%. Safety remains a prime concern when it comes to choice, as you would well imagine. And as a result, you're seeing a real trend in the market towards parents choosing for their children local bilingual schools rather than alternatives offshore. Interest in taking the Gaokao, which has been delayed until July 7th of 8th, is up. And what we can deduce from that is that there is likely a trend towards domestic market choices at higher education level, which again is unsurprising given that that safety factor. We could roll on to the next slide, please. So in terms of what we need to do and keep doing in the market, I've got a variety of points here. So in the China market, there's a need for us to boost perceptions of online delivery, particularly in that lead up to semester 2, so we can maximise enrolments in online programs in Australia. And we can do this through social media campaigns which promote online capability. Austrade has a couple of initiatives in this space. The first is our Study with Australia program, which features a range of taster programs of different Australian providers as hosted on the FutureLearn platform. And so, since that particular campaign has been launched, we've now had 107,000 students log on to those programs. So I'd encourage you to continue to socialise that campaign on your own social media channels in the China market. Also, we have our campaign, which we're still developing at present, which is the In This Together Tongzhu Good Gongji China online study video campaign. That campaign will feature video testimonials of 10 students from China and Australia talking about their experiences studying online. And we're working together with DESI on that campaign, and it will be socialised in the marketplace in June and July. There's also a need for us to continue to reinforce positive messaging in regards to the Australia-China education relationship, particularly with some of the bilateral difficulties at the moment. And we can do this through applying the hashtag of In This Together or Tongzhou Gongji on Weibo. So any positive messaging you have that you're putting out into the marketplace, please leverage those hashtags. And finally, we must focus on the fact that we have a real window of opportunity, I think, vis-a-vis competitors as we head towards 2021 and semester 1 in that year. The message loud and clear that we need to be putting out to the market is that we are the COVID-19 safe house. The extraordinary success I think that Australia has had in that space is understood, and I think being well received in the marketplace. It's important that that messaging is nuanced and we're not comparing ourselves with other markets, but just making clear that Australia is a very safe destination to send your child in relation to COVID-19. And certainly the feedback from agents has been clear that with regard to our competitors, the US and UK, Australia and New Zealand are in a very good place when it comes to that aspect. So just moving on to the next slide, please. So looking ahead with regard to recovery, we have put together a calendar to outline some of the initiatives that would comprise a recovery plan. So as I mentioned in June, July coming up, there's that real need to drive online delivery in the lead up to semester 2, and we'll be doing that with that In This Together China online study video campaign together with DESI and with our Study with Australia campaign that I mentioned earlier. Then moving into September, October, we'll be having our Festival of Australia campaign, which will be mostly digital at this stage. And the education component of that will feature a rollout of the new Nation brand and its education message in the market. And that will incorporate that COVID-19 Safe House messaging that I mentioned earlier. For all you Queenslanders, we'll have the rollout of our Northern Australia campaign, which will be promoting key regional destinations in Queensland. Initially a focus on Townsville and Cairns, but also more broadly regional Queensland as well. And that will be good for diversification of the marketplace. Into November, we will once again have our Austrade Australia-China Education Business Planning Summit, and aspects of that will be virtual, so you will be able to tune into that. And we've previously involved many institutions from Queensland in the past, and we look forward to them being involved in that again as we commit to our 2021 market recovery. Following on from that into next year, we will have our Austrade DESI China Early Childhood Skills Training Showcase, which is to promote Australian early childhood skills training capability in the market together with DESI, and presuming that the Chinese border is open then and Australians can freely travel to China, we welcome your involvement in that. In March, we'll have our China International Education Exhibition and Tour, where the Nation brand will be leveraged once again, but to a national media presence, as there's a lot of media attention on that particular event. And we'll have an Australian pavilion in the Nation brand colours. We'll also be running our international school outreach program to second and third tier cities in that month as well. And finally, all the way through to November 2021, we'll have our Austrade DESI EdTech Online Education Showcase. As Brooke mentioned, we've got a strong focus on online education as a priority in the market. And this is an opportunity for us to really show to Chinese stakeholders the capabilities in that space and attempt to drive the policy dial in China in terms of recognition of award qualifications going forward. So if I could just go to the next slide, please. So just to finish off, a reminder, I think many of you are aware of this, but nonetheless, good to just go over it quickly, that we have our Study Australia Resource Hub, which contains toolkits for online education delivery into China, as Brooke mentioned earlier, as well as a toolkit on virtual recruitment and updates and information for education agents and providers, as well as collateral for that In This Together campaign that I mentioned. That hub is free. There is no paywall required in order to access it. So please jump online and have a look at it. It has a terrific array of resources for you all. And then just to the last slide, please. So to finish off, we all need to remember never to let a good crisis go to waste. As JA mentioned, there are some silver linings in what is happening. And I think through this crisis will come significant opportunity for Australia. So I look forward to working with you all and with Brooke and JA and the team going forward as we make those opportunities a reality. Thank you.
Red, thank you so much. We really value our collaborative partnership with you in your role leading Austrade's international education team across Greater China, but even beyond in the Republic of Korea and Mongolia. And it's evident that your background in the education sector, having worked with universities in our southern states, and also your law background, is being put to much good use right now. So I really want to appreciate those insights on on how you're seeing the industry and challenges and some of the initiatives coming up. So thanks so much, Rhett. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our last presenter today, Miss Makia Ma. Makia is based in Beijing and she's your Queensland advocate. She's your study Queensland representative for North China. So Makia is going to run through a few key messages, and she has a PowerPoint. So Makia, on behalf of our team, thanks so much for representing Study Queensland China, and over to you.
And first of all, I just want to, wave my hand to say a big hello from our Beijing office today, because it's especially during after a long time or period of working from home, I feel so fresh coming back to office and speak to you online today. And also, I feel our China team is very lucky to pick up today for the webinar, because for a lot of Chinese, young Chinese today, May 20th by number is 520, right? So it's our unofficial Valentine's Day for Chinese. So according to the pronunciation of the number in Mandarin, and so we're very, very lucky, and we love you for sure. So I'm not just trying to share my screen. Give me a second. Sorry. Can you hear my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
So today, I'm very honored to speak and to represent the whole Study Queensland China team, and to give you a bit update and from our understanding of the market, including some of the opportunities and challenges that we see from here. As you can see from the current slides that I'm sharing, I'll probably start with the question that you may ask our team, which is, will international students follow on their study abroad plans for this year and next? Can you hear me right? Sorry.
Yes, the sound is fine, Makia.
Great. I think our answer to that question is very simple. We do encourage you to continue your business as usual and continue to work closely with your partners for both existing and future programs, and continue to raise awareness that you are here, and to show them that you are here to support and to build market confidence. And that's very important. And the overall picture that we think the demand for study abroad program or study abroad remains still for the coming year, but just people might adjust a bit their plan to begin the university programs in 2021. And we see the opportunities out there in the market, and we actually consider this special time as a rare opportunity to establish trust between our institutions and our partners. And if you look at the first column, our higher education sector, same story. We think the core demand remains still, and as there's a number of international schools here in China, and those students at international school in China, they are taking international curriculum, and they are committed to study abroad. And obviously, we think there's a pipeline of students waiting there who have already started the application prior to the virus, and who will continue their study plan post COVID-19. And when you think about the current employment difficulties for our graduates, you'll find the interesting thing that the demand for postgraduate level programs might remain still. And just our people now begin to rethink about the future majors of study, like we listed on the slides for you. And those majors, including public health, artificial intelligence, 5G constructions, big data, and those are the majors that gradually become popular due to the demand of the market and our students. Vocational education, what is more interesting that we found that we see opportunities in this sector. I think Brooke touched a bit this area too, and we think this area is important, and because it becomes an important area for China. China looking at a reform in this sector. China and the government attach importance to the development of vocational education. And that's, you will see the trainers training is in demand, that going online is possible. And you might also mention or ask the 1+X pilot program, as well as the double high program for China. But here, given the time frame, we can't go detail, but we do encourage you to have a read of the majors and the list of institutions that have been approved by Ministry of Education to carry forward these initiatives. Think about how the institutions would like to train their teachers, construct new way of teaching and learning with engagement of the industry, and how the government defines the standards for 双高, which is high quality of higher vocational colleges with high quality vocational majors. For our schools, we think the short-term programs like the study tour, the demand for study tour is still in high demand when the travel ban is lifted. And I recall in one of President Xi's speech, he emphasized the importance of physical health development of our China's young generation. So China will promote hardly on young generation's cultural learning and physical exercise, and improve the system of youth-focused sports event. And here, I think Queensland, we are proud for ourselves for the quality and the standard of our outdoor education, right? So, and of course, the STEM-related programs, again, China recently stepped forward and highlighting its willingness to cultivate talents in science-related areas. When we had a discussion and a chat with our agent network here, we found that actually some of our agents, they are proactively looking for resources and course contents online from overseas, and they now tend to work with their partner schools actually in China to introduce the online programs or develop apps that focus on STEM or English. So, and even some of them asked us about our curriculum, if our curriculum can be delivered offshore at international schools here in China. And if you have existing sister school or friendship school relationship, you might want to continue your conversation with the schools and maintain the relationship and looking at opportunities together with your partner. If you don't have any, we consider you might think about to establish a new one during this specific period of time, and to make this relationship a platform to step forward for your future. Alicos and non-awards, we think same story here. For Alicos, we see the demand for professional English training from from industries, and we see many of our institutions have already thought about this area and started collaboration with both universities and vocational institutions in delivering the similar programs together. And we consider the English preparation programs going online as an emerging opportunity to work with your partner and in the future, and at least it is a open option for all of us. Student exchange and study abroad is an ongoing topic for partnership between institutions, like Brooke also mentioned about the micro-credential, and it is the new word for us, but we see that there is a growing importance of non-degree credential for our universities here in China too, and the university are beginning to expand beyond degree offerings. So now I guess it would be the question that we want to ask you. Are you ready for a changed environment? And we're hoping that you are getting ready for the future. Obviously, the pandemic has brought disruption to our sector, not to mention the travel ban, the cancellation of all the programs and, staff travel and things like that. The trend for us is impacted, and as Red mentions, the numbers of application dropped, and many agents we talked also indicated the decision process took longer and became slower, and people now use more time to think about their future plans and also their real return on the investment. And that's perhaps also measured in monetary term because employment also now becomes a key topic for students and parents to consider. So we need time to understand the changes of the market, and we think now it is the time. And for everything now going online become a phenomenon, like we see the student recruitment fair going online, our institutions delivering courses online, and also a quote from Red, he just mentioned about promoting our online capabilities, which is true. But don't forget that while we are adapting to the changes and to the market, and China is also developing too. China's online education is developing so quickly that we think it nearly turns itself into a competitor in the world. So when people talking about bringing experience to China in this field, have a think about the volume, the speed, and the time frame that China constructed its online platform during this specific period of time. So here these from a recent media report of China until April the 3rd, there were 1,454 higher education institutions of China turned to online teaching, and there were about 950,000 teachers delivering online courses and covering a total of over 940,000 subjects, and the online participants nationwide total to about 11.8 billion, and there were additional 5,000 MOOC units had been created as well. So have a think about all of this. Nevertheless, the mixture. We think the mixture of online and offline was obviously going to be the new trend. And here I really like to quote from one of our colleagues based in Hong Kong, Bridget, and she reminded us that at the very beginning, when it comes to crisis in Chinese, it has two words. One is wei, and that means threats, and the other is ji, as you can see on the slides. That means opportunity. So we hope you all agree with us. Whenever there's a crisis, there are both challenges and opportunities. Obviously, we think the impact will be temporary, although the trend and market structure, as I just mentioned, might change a bit. And what we think matters is people's perception, and how people perceive the value of study abroad in their mind is extremely significant to us. Finally, in the last slide, we are trying to give you a brief idea of the whole China picture, and we'd like to touch a bit of our China team's focus as well. You can see from your from the China market landscape we put up there. We just pick up a few key points that for your information. And again, we want to kindly remind you that China is a big market with opportunities for sure, but bear in mind that the different regions in China would have different focus areas or interests when it comes to collaboration. In terms of the policy focus, I think I've already covered a bit when I went through last slide, so I won't go further here. But as you can see, double high, first-class construction, and internationalization of education, these are the policy drivers that we think that we are encouraging you to consider and read carefully when you have time. Back to our key focuses, you can see those areas we listed there. Government to government relationship, industry engagement, agent, alumni, and social media. And our team will continuously, keep contact with our partners here in China. And of course, agent here still matter and playing a crucial part. And for the sectors and regions, our China team obviously want to cover all sectors given the complexity and diversity of the market. And we're looking at cities in Northeast China, Southwest China, Eastern China, and the Greater Bay regions for opportunities. And don't forget, we have like 4 offices here in China, and we have education BDMs located in these 4 offices, and we're ready, and we are here and ready to help you. And finally, we definitely encourage our teamwork, and our China team is very keen to work with you throughout the time of uncertainty, and of course, continuously in the future. So feel free to contact with us. Thank you very much, and happy 520. Back to you, Jay.
Thanks, Makia. That was some great detailed insights and some practical suggestions for Queensland. And I just want to take this chance to shout out. So Makia is your Study Queensland rep in Beijing. We've also got Jen Wen Xu in Shanghai, Julia Zhang in Chengdu, Tequila Cao in Guangzhou, and Diana Liu in Hong Kong. So as Makia said, the team's here to work with you, and we really look forward to your support and collaboration on the 2020-2021 forward program of Study Queensland, as well as our work with important allies and stakeholders represented today with our guest speakers, with Brooke and Rhett. So that wraps up the formal presentations, and the slides will be sent for anyone who had difficulties seeing the slides. They will be emailed out to you as a follow-up to the webinar. But now let's shift gears and go quickly to an interactive discussion. So just to kick off, Rhett and Brooke, I've got a hard question for you here. So in the past week or so, we've had a lot of media on agricultural challenges that we are facing with China. We've seen some reactions on barley. So could this be extended to the IET sector?
Hi, Jay. Shall I go first? Yeah, look, it is difficult times around the globe at this point. But what I guess I focus on when people ask me this question is, first of all, no crystal ball to tell what the future looks like. But education relationship with China is a long-standing one. It has a great deal of longevity, and it has been strengthened over 40 plus years. Every relationship has its ups and downs, its twists and turns, and I think it's true to say that our education relationship has withstood that, and in fact grown stronger even despite that. What is key, I think, is all of the things that Makia and Rhett have touched on in their presentations today, is that we continue to ensure a quality product, a quality contribution to the relationship, that Australia is a safe and welcoming place, are all things that are in our control, to ensure the very best for our education relationship, so that it will continue despite what might go on in other sectors. I'll leave it to Rhett and Makia.
Sure, thanks, Brooke, and fully agree with your comments there. I think the only thing I would add is that COVID-19 safe house reputation, which we will have together with New Zealand amongst the major destinations, I think will trump anything in the bilateral relations space. So I think that Chinese parents, when casting their eye across the globe and looking at destinations, when they compare Australia and New Zealand's experience vis-a-vis that of the UK, Europe and the US, we will come out on top. And I think that that supersedes any of the ups and downs that go on in the bilateral relationship.
Thanks, Red. Thanks, Red and Brooke. We've had some questions come in from the audience on more crystal ball outlooks. So some questions have been regarding special visas for students who were meant to depart, who are meant to depart in June, but they may not be able to leave. Are there any updates on visas, Australian visa grants?
Unfortunately, JA, I'm going to have to leave that one for Home Affairs to respond to. But, you know, rest assured that visa issues, as we are made aware of them, we certainly pass them on to our contacts over at Home Affairs. And we know a range of visa issues are under consideration, but that would be something for them to have to answer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, understand.
Yeah, I can add to that, JA. I know that Home Affairs is working on a visa package at the moment, and they're planning to release it going forward. Timing of that's still unknown, but as Brooke mentioned, it's under active consideration.
Great. And Red and Brooke, are you aware when there may be further updates, particularly for higher education or also for our schools, when they need to respond to students who are looking at semester 2 commencement? Do you know when there may be further updates from the Australian government for our education industry to give some guidance on responding to offers and to students?
At this stage, again, it's very much crystal ball. It all depends on that staged approach that the Prime Minister announced. And, you know, we've only just commenced stage 1. So I think, you know, everyone's been rightly very cautious around how we progress through this. But the signs are positive. But I'm afraid I've got no firm advice on semester 2.
Thanks. Red comments?
Yeah, nothing further to add, and as has been alluded to, crystal ball gazing is a dangerous business, I think. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, well, we'll leave our crystal balling at that. We have had some questions about Australian border reopening, but I sense the answers will be similar, as we're in stage 1 and there are 3 steps. So I think the answer is clear for that one. So I'm just going to shift gears, and I've got a question for you, Rhett and Makia. We've talked about Australia doing well and positioning itself as a safe haven, a COVID-19 safe haven, given our performance during the crisis and in the management of it. So I'm wanting to know a bit about agents. A fair portion of our students come through agents, and obviously service fees and commissions are taken due to the circumstances. What are your forecasts, or what are you hearing about the education sector in China? You know, will some of the companies fall over? Will there be some M&A? What are you hearing and seeing on the agent space? Perhaps Rhett and Makia.
Makia, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. We did have a kind of internal discussion with our agent network here in China, like I just mentioned when I went over our PowerPoint slides. And I think we're very lucky in comparison with other countries. I think the feedback from our agents sounds to me was very positive. People perceive that Australia is a very safe country to send their students study overseas. And also, I think from our understanding that our agents, they are, although the disruption was there for sure, but they are trying very hard to maintain their business and maintain their daily operation. And you see many agents there turning online mode. They ran student recruitment fairs online, and they organize several seminars and discuss keep contact with us and for information sharing, and I think they were positive towards the messaging that parents feel safe or at least in comparison with other country, they feel safe to send their children to study in Australia. And they thought the centralized messaging was quite important, and they want us to share, as much information as possible from our government, and keep contact with the students, and continually showing our support to students through various media or social media platforms, and that's important. And like I just mentioned, the perception for, in the minds of the students and parents, how much value added to the study abroad, and also in terms of the return on investment was quite important. So in our messaging and in our voice to the market, we have to, I think we have to reinforce this caring messaging, and also reinforce the message that we are here to support our students and also to support our partners.
Thanks, Makia. Red?
I think, just to add to what Mackie has said there, look, we're not aware of any agencies potentially falling over. We've certainly got feedback re revenue losses, but not in terms of any collapse. And I think, Mackia's point about the virtual recruitment capabilities of Chinese agents is a really good one. I think they're probably the best in the world, and reflective, I think, of China's embrace of digital technology. They were so quick to set up virtual events, and many of them already had existing platforms they could leverage when the border was closed. Just in the first 6 weeks since the border was closed, we were involved in over 20 agent events on a virtual basis, and the outreach from those events was just terrific. So much better than you get from a physical event. I mean, an example is one of the events we participated in, where we gave the Study Australia presentation online, we had 100,000 views and then 20,000 downloads of the presentation afterwards. So that's perhaps a silver lining in terms of what's going on. A real increase in outreach stemming from that virtual capability of the agent sector.
Thanks, Red. That's positive. So another shifting gears, with the travel bans, we can't crystal ball gaze on travel bans and when they might lift. So obviously we're having online learning continue. Do you have any sense of how China will assess online qualifications? The Chinese Service Centre for Scholarly Exchange, CSE. Do we have any feeling for how China will look at qualifications that have been done with quite a stint of them online?
Thanks, JA. I can take that one. We have been in talks with the CSE about this. Ordinarily, full online qualifications is not something that the Chinese education sector, education authorities would acknowledge in terms of foreign qualifications. But they did on the 3rd of April issue some advice to say that they will take a flexible approach for students that are affected by the pandemic. But I must stress that they say that it's for the students affected by the pandemic. So it is pandemic context only at this stage. We think that covers semester 1. As to whether it covers new students, commencing students in semester 2, that is a question that we have put to the CSE for guidance. They have come back saying, strictly speaking, their flexibility had only been contemplated for semester 1. but they are willing to consider the pandemic situation in semester 2 to determine whether or not they will maintain that flexibility. Our assumption is that it will continue given the pandemic situation continues. However, if the world, changes markedly in the next couple of weeks and months such that it's not an issue and education delivery is not impacted, I suspect the CSCSE would return to their usual position of not recognising full online qualifications. Now, that's a very broad overview. If anybody has specific questions, very happy to receive those. We do make representations to the CSCSE quite regularly, and they have been very forthcoming, very patient with us actually, with our sometimes very exacting questions. So please do pass them on if there is something we can ask on your behalf, or if we can find out for you. I'm very open to doing that.
Great, thank you, thanks so much. So there's also been some questions about, you've talked a lot about positive messaging. Are there ways that we can band together and ensure consistency on our messaging from the education training sector regarding our openness and welcoming environment for students from Asia, and particularly from... Rhett, you talked about some of the programs that you're leading, and Makia, you've also shared some Study Queensland programs. Any comments on how we might better communicate together, particularly given Queensland is such a diverse regional state?
Sure, Jay. Look, I think in terms of establishing unification of message, where you are putting out anything on social media that is a positive message in the China market, it is important to use that hashtag in this together, hashtag Tongzhou Gunji tag at the base of your message, and that will ensure that we've got a unified slogan that runs through everything that we're putting out. You can also come as institutions and put material to myself or to Brooke to put up on our respective channels in the market. DESI has its own Weibo channel in the market. The Embassy has a Weibo and WeChat channel, and Austrade has its Study Australia Weibo and WeChat channels, and they have a very significant audience. So we're always happy to receive material, and we've received a lot over the course of the last few months. And we're ensuring that an education message goes out on the Embassy channels, which have the largest audience, on at least a weekly basis. So there is a real consistent approach to what's happening, but I encourage you to use those hashtags and reshare that Study with Australia and that China online study video campaign in the marketplace as it's socialised.
Thanks, Red. A couple more questions to quickly fit in before we need to wrap up. So today you've all touched on China's transnational education sector. What could this look like in another 5 years' time? Is it going to be an opportunity or more of a threat? Brooke and Rhett, maybe you might lead us on your...
Sorry, I was muting. I couldn't unmute myself. TNE, looking at TNE over the next 5 years. So COVID, I think, is going to impact all economies into the future. And again, crystal ball required to determine how much that will impact education cooperation between us and any country, to be honest. But given that we have a very strong foundation, we already have extensive TNE across all sectors. I think, there is certainly the impetus from providers and from the government to continue that engagement. And that's where we're looking at the moment, where the priority areas exist. VET obviously is a priority in both economies, China and Australia. There are changes occurring there that I think we need to explore further to strengthen the cooperation into that space in the future. And online, given we've all had to make enormous shifts in online delivery in Australia and in China, now really does seem the time to cooperate on that more, share experiences, best practice, look at how we can better quality assure online education, and have joint delivery in that space as well. So I can't say what it's going to look like in 5 years, but there's certainly drivers for us to continue to strengthen the TNE relationship, and there are priorities, mutual priorities in both countries that gives us, plenty of material to work on.
Thanks, Brooke. Rhett and Makia, do you want to add anything before I pose one more question?
Yeah, just very quickly, JA. In terms of looking ahead with TNE, what I'd suggest is that the returns may be slightly less going forward, particularly where the MOE is generally only approving 3+1 and 4+0 programs. So I think we have to really think about, in terms of our approach, how we, I guess, maximise our returns in the marketplace, looking at things like micro-credentialing, which Brooke spoke about earlier, in both the skills space and indeed the higher education space. So I think that's probably the main, change probably going forward, which we've seen transition over the last couple of years as we've moved to COVID.
Thanks, Rhett. Makia, any comments from you before I pose one last?
Yeah, I think the message for us is for our China team is very clear, and I did already mention that in while I present. I think we are very confident that there are opportunities here in the market, as I just pointed out, for different sectors. And given the complexity and diversity of the market, you just need to, opportunities out there, maybe just adjust a bit of your marketing strategy and looking at what China's focus is important, and whether or not we can match their China government's priority, and to work with our partners here in China continuously.
Thanks, Makia. So one last granular question. Is it too early, or have you already started to see some indications of future demand in particular programs or subjects? So that might be in vet or higher education, but are you seeing there be any shifts? So for example, maybe more interest in allied health, as against proof before accounting. Are there any indications from your networks in China on impacts of COVID-19 at that very granular level in terms of courses and discipline interests? So maybe Makia and Rhett.
I'm sorry, JA, I apologise. I'm going to have to go because I've got another webinar that I'm presenting at. So I'm going to have to sign off now. So I'll leave that one to Makia. But look, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today, and very much looking forward to working with Brooke, yourself, and Makia, and the rest of the team going forward. So thank you again.
Rhett, thanks so much. Take good care, and we really appreciate the collaborative partnership we have with you and your team. So take care, Rhett. So we'll just wrap up on this question, and then we'll also sign off. So we'll say goodbye to Rhett. So Makia, do you want to just quickly touch on this, and then I'll wrap up?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this too in my previous slides. Some of the key study areas that our people, people or students here in China, they're looking at, including public health, 5G, big data, and those are the areas that become more and more popular. And I think that's just a rise from the disruption of the COVID-19. But again, we do encourage you to read carefully the recent announcement or policy update from the China government. Is very important. Yeah, and have a look, have a read of the. I think many of you might be familiar with Shuangji, strengthening foundation plan, and that recently announced by the Chinese government and Ministry of Education. So have a read that policy piece, and I'm sure you'll find interesting things there.
Thanks, Makia. And for those who are unable to access that information, obviously we can go through resource centres like Brooke, Rhett and Makia. So look, we're over time, and I just want to thank once again, Brooke, thank you so much. We love working with you and your team. You guys are awesome. Thanks for your support of Queensland. And Makia and the Study Queensland team, thanks so much. So everyone,
Thank you.
valued this time together. There's been some great questions, a lot of crystal balling, still a lot of uncertainty, but some truly silver linings in the clouds that have been shared today through our panelists and our presentations. So just one housekeeping, you will receive a follow-on email with links to the PowerPoints as well as websites, which were referred to earlier on by Brooke and Rhett. And if you have enjoyed this webinar, please do register for the next Study Queensland webinar on the 3rd of June, which zooms into Taiwan's bilingual education market. So you can register for that webinar through our website or contact Study Queensland. So stay well, everyone. Thank you so much for your support. We are conscious that it is indeed an uncertain and challenging time for us all. But Queensland, you are sticking together, you're coming together, and we very much appreciate that. Our team is here to support you. We work closely with Brooke and Rhett and other key stakeholders, including our China partners, and we look forward to being of continued support and assistance to you. So stay well, take care, and hope to see you again soon.